For generations, Earth had watched the stars in wonder. What began as curiosity turned into contact, and contact evolved into cautious friendship. Humanity joined the Galactic Concord, a council of advanced species united under peace, trade, and mutual defense. The humans were young by galactic standards, yet they learned quickly. They adapted faster than anyone expected. Their technologies, once crude and primitive, evolved at an alarming pace. At first, the older races celebrated Earth's rise. They applauded humanity's contributions, marveled at their resilience, and envied their creative solutions to age-old interstellar problems. But envy has a short path to fear, and fear leads to betrayal. In the grand halls of the Galactic Concord, beneath ceilings carved with the ancient symbols of unity and progress, the representatives of Earth stood in admiration. It was a proud moment for humanity, a symbol of how far the species had come. Once limited to one small blue planet, humanity now stood shoulder to shoulder with ancient civilizations that had traveled the stars for thousands of years. For the first time in history, Earth had earned a place among the architects of peace, prosperity, and shared responsibility. The Galactic Concord was not merely an alliance, it was a vision, formed over a millennium ago. It was built upon the belief that no species should ever walk alone in the cold silence of the cosmos. It provided a structure for interstellar diplomacy, economic development, scientific advancement, and joint defense. Though many older species had grown comfortable within its networks, Earth's rapid rise had introduced fresh energy. With an innovative spirit, humanity contributed new ideas to everything from sustainable terraforming to neural communication systems. Their presence was welcomed, and their determination admired. It was during this era of growing trust that the Defense Accords were proposed, a powerful and symbolic gesture meant to unite all member species under one intergalactic defense network. The Accords would ensure mutual protection, combined intelligence sharing, and military assistance during external threats. Earth, though cautious, saw great value in unity. The diplomats from Earth believed that the Accords were a path toward lasting peace, where each world's strength could become a shield for the others. Earth agreed to sign. As a gesture of trust, the Terran Defense Fleet was restructured. Ships that once orbited Earth were reassigned to shared missions. Human carriers patrolled the trade routes of the Serenid worlds. Engineering vessels assisted in rebuilding war-torn Kelvar moons. Special Terran units trained alongside Arxali Guardians to promote tactical cooperation. Earth's military presence became widespread, visible in over 15 sectors of Concord-controlled space. Back home, the people of Earth watched these developments with pride. News channels broadcast images of Terran and alien soldiers standing side by side. Children in schools learned about diplomacy and interspecies respect. The world believed that history was turning a page, that the future held more understanding than conflict. After centuries of global challenges, humanity had finally found a place to belong beyond its skies. But not every voice in the galaxy celebrated this union. In hidden chambers and private communication relays, concerns were quietly shared. Among the oldest species of the Concord, whispers grew louder. Some saw Earth's adaptability not as a gift, but as an unpredictable force. Others misunderstood humanity's emotional depth, resilience, and rapid growth. They questioned whether a species so young could be trusted with access to intergalactic weapon systems, advanced technologies, and planetary defense strategies. And so, quietly, opinions began to shift. A few Concord members started reevaluating the long-term role of Earth within their network. While no official action was taken, intelligence networks began monitoring Terran movements. Secret studies were commissioned to assess the risk of human-led military growth. Some leaders believed that humanity would always place its homeworld first, even if it meant challenging the greater balance. Despite these growing uncertainties, Earth continued to act in good faith. Their representatives remained transparent. Their soldiers upheld every joint mission with professionalism. Their scientists openly shared research and breakthroughs. To the public eye, nothing had changed. Peace still appeared real, but within the High Council, there were those who believed they were acting for the good of the galaxy. They feared what humanity might become, not because of anything it had done, but because of what it might be capable of in the future. And in that fear, the seed of division quietly took root. The pact, meant to symbolize unity, now held shadows behind its promises. What had been signed as a bond of protection and friendship was being questioned by some who had once welcomed Earth's involvement. And while the humans honored every word, they were unaware that not all signatures on the treaty were made with honest intent. In the quiet between the stars, where words echo and trust is fragile, a moment of history was unfolding, one where good intentions stood side by side with growing doubt. The defense accords were real, the unity was sincere, but within that unity, something unseen was beginning to stir. And though Earth had no reason to suspect it, the path ahead would demand more than trust. It would require strength, clarity, and a readiness to protect not just themselves, but the very meaning of peace they believed in. The silence began not with a storm, but with a whisper. Following the defense accords, the Galactic community carried on with routine communications. Reports were filed, patrols were scheduled, and supply chains between star systems operated smoothly. But soon, subtle changes in Earth's behavior began to appear. One by one, Terran representatives started missing Concord sessions. Diplomatic channels from Earth slowed down. Automated responses replaced personal transmissions. Even casual cross-species communications, once full of energy and friendliness, became strangely quiet. At first, the Concord assumed this was temporary. Earth's presence had become deeply integrated, and a few missed messages were seen as technical delays. After all, solar flares and deep space disruptions were common across sectors. But as weeks turned into months, and no Terran official appeared at the Grand Assembly, concern began to grow. Queries were sent, formal envoys were requested, but Earth responded with only silence. What no one outside Earth knew was that the silence was not a mistake, it was a choice. Within the shadow of Earth's moon, far beneath the surface of the Tycho crater, the United Terran Command held emergency meetings. The betrayal, still hidden from public knowledge, had left Earth's leadership shaken, but not broken. Trusted colonies had been attacked. Shared outposts had been sabotaged. Human ships in allied sectors had been left stranded, with many never returning. And yet, Earth had not retaliated. Not yet. President Amara Voss, a former ambassador turned wartime strategist, addressed the Leadership Council with composed strength. Her voice did not waver. If we answer now, we answer with emotion. If we wait, we answer with purpose. The plan was not to react, but to prepare. This decision shocked many within the inner circle. Earth had the capability to strike back immediately. Terran fleets, while decentralized, still carried enough strength to respond across sectors. But President Voss and her advisors chose patience. Retaliation without understanding the full scope of the betrayal would only lead to chaos. Earth would step back, not in defeat, but in deep calculation. Thus began what historians would later call the Great Silence. All Terran ambassadors were recalled. All open communications to Concord networks were shut down. Even trade routes to neutral species were redirected through Terran-controlled lanes. Earth decommissioned public colonies near Concord space and quietly began relocating civilians to more secure zones. Media outlets on Earth were instructed to report peace, not conflict, while Strategic Command rerouted resources into defense, research, and long-term survival. The rest of the galaxy, left without answers, began to speculate. Some species believed Earth was grieving, struggling to recover from internal divisions. Others thought a global pandemic or a natural disaster had shaken the Terran structure. A few believed Earth was planning something far more dangerous. Rumors spread quickly in the absence of truth. The Arxali broadcast theories about civil unrest on Mars. The Kelvar accused human factions of falling into rebellion. Even the Concord's own intelligence division filed a formal report suggesting that Earth's silence was a result of psychological breakdown due to betrayal trauma. But all of it was only noise. Deep beneath Antarctica's old glacial vaults, Earth's military minds and civilian leaders had begun working on long-term strategies. They called it Project Deliverance, a collection of initiatives focused on survival, security, and silent progress. The project unified military and scientific teams across hidden facilities in the Kuiper Belt, the dark side of Europa, and deep within Venusian bunkers. It was not about vengeance. It was about ensuring Earth would never be caught off guard again. While the Concorde measured silence and frustration, Earth measured it in construction timelines, security layers, and shield frequencies. It was not isolation. It was transformation. And while the children of Earth continued to attend school, and artists still sang in the cities, the quiet hum of preparation echoed across the solar system. No messages, no warnings, no threats, just a calm, powerful silence, the kind that only comes before something that cannot be undone. The galaxy had turned away, assuming humanity had lost its voice. But in reality, Earth had not vanished. It had simply begun to listen, and somewhere in the silence, the stars began to feel the weight of that listening. Far beyond the warm embrace of Earth's sun lies a region of cold silence, a vast halo of icy debris and ancient rock that marks the edges of the solar system. This region, known to human astronomers as the Oort cloud, had long been a mystery. For centuries, it was believed to be a graveyard of comets and frozen remnants. But in the age of interstellar awakening, Earth had given it a new name, the Black Belt, and a new purpose. As Project Deliverance moved from planning to action, Earth needed a place beyond the reach of Concorde eyes. They needed space to build, space to test, and most importantly, space to disappear. The Oort cloud offered all of these in abundance. It was beyond the edge of standard Concorde sensor networks, covered in interference fields caused by electromagnetic anomalies and dense spatial radiation. What others saw as unusable territory, Earth saw as perfect camouflage. Within the Oort's cold depths, Earth began its rebirth. Across hundreds of kilometers, construction drones operated in absolute silence. They carved out hollow spheres within frozen asteroids, built stealth hangars into icy moons, and laid the groundwork for black site shipyards, production hubs that would never appear on any galactic registry. All activity was controlled remotely from deep Earth command centers, with signals bouncing through secure quantum relays that could not be traced or intercepted. The facilities themselves were marvels of Terran engineering. Unlike traditional military bases, these were modular, self-sustaining environments equipped with artificial gravity, radiation shielding, and biological recycling systems. They ran on a combination of dark matter extraction cores and ultra-efficient solar absorption arrays. The builders were not traditional soldiers or engineers, but hybrid AI teams, machines programmed with centuries of knowledge and human instincts for improvisation and survival. At the heart of it all was Facility 01, hidden inside the shell of a shattered planetoid. Here, Earth constructed what would become the foundation of a new kind of fleet, one that required no home base, no official orders, and no permission from any council to act. The Ghost Fleet. This was not an ordinary navy. The Ghost Fleet would be Earth's silent answer to betrayal. It would consist of ships designed for absolute stealth, speed, and impact. Some vessels were no larger than a house, designed to enter atmospheres unnoticed and deliver a payload in seconds. Others were massive dreadnoughts covered in radar-dampening alloy, capable of bending light and heat around themselves to become invisible even to close-range scans. But beyond size and power, the most important feature was autonomy. The Ghost Fleet could operate for decades without resupply. Each ship carried advanced artificial intelligence with emotional learning protocols, bonded to a single human captain. These captains were not chosen for rank or reputation. They were selected for resilience, moral clarity, and unwavering resolve. Back on Earth, families of these captains were told their loved ones had taken research assignments. In reality, They had vanished into black ships with no destination other than justice. Project Deliverance was not only building weapons, it was also building minds. Hidden under the ice of Europa, the Neural Forge ran endless battle simulations, predicting thousands of possible responses from Concord forces. Earth strategists learned how to counter every formation, jam every frequency, and anticipate every political move. Scientists created devices that could bypass galactic shielding, crack planetary encryption, and even destabilize synthetic atmospheres in case of emergency. These tools were stored deep within the Ord, waiting for the moment they might be needed. And yet, Earth remained silent. No warning was given. No demands were made. Project Deliverance was not about revenge in the traditional sense. It was about reclaiming safety, not just for Earth, but for any species that might someday walk into the stars with honesty in its heart. The Terran High Council issued one guiding principle to every technician, commander, and pilot who worked in the Black Belt. We do not build for war. We build to ensure that betrayal never feels easy again. And so, as the Concord continued its meetings and broadcasts, unaware of what stirred just beyond their range, the humans of Earth prepared, not for destruction, but for a future in which no one could strip their voice away. In the cold darkness of the Oort cloud, amidst ancient ice and forgotten gravity, Earth did not sleep. It remembered, it listened, and it built in shadows, in silence, and in absolute determination. The message arrived not with sound, but with light. A lone Terran probe, disguised as space debris, drifted into orbit above Arxeli Prime, one of the Concord's oldest core worlds and a symbol of interstellar diplomacy. It had no visible power source, no registered origin, no signal that could be interpreted by standard detection systems. And yet it pulsed softly, rhythmically, as if beating with a silent heart. It was quickly retrieved by local patrols and brought to the planetary security station. What followed was confusion. The device had no external markings, but when scanned internally, it emitted a coded transmission, not vocal, but visual. The pattern was unmistakable, a sequence of rotating symbols overlaid with a waveform that matched an archived Terran encryption standard. The last time the symbol had been used was during humanity's first entry into the Concord over 70 years ago. The file name in the decoded sequence was a single word: Deliverance. The moment the transmission was decrypted, the clock began. Within minutes, networks across the Concord began experiencing disruptions. Communication relays flickered. Navigation systems aboard starships in nearby sectors began rerouting. At first, it seemed like a technical failure, but soon, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every affected system bore signs of a highly sophisticated infiltration, one that used outdated communication frequencies and protocols believed to be obsolete. But now it was clear. Earth had kept its old technology alive in silence, preserving the very codes the Concord had long forgotten. While they had moved forward in public, humanity had continued mastering what others discarded. And now, those codes had become keys. Keys that unlocked doors the Concord never meant to leave open. Then they arrived. Above the Concord's central diplomatic moon, Cinder 6, 4 unregistered ships appeared without warning. They did not arrive through traditional jump gates. They did not announce their presence. They did not respond to hails. Their hulls reflected no energy signature. No weapon systems were visible. No insignia could be seen. Only silence. In the control towers of Cinder 6, panic erupted. Defense systems powered up. Warnings were sent to Allied fleets. Evacuation protocols were whispered but not executed. No one wanted to believe this was real. At precisely 1721 Galactic Standard Time, all 4 ships activated in unison. They did not launch missiles. They did not fire beams. Instead, they disassembled themselves, deliberately. Each vessel's outer shell broke apart, revealing a glowing metallic core, pulsing with energy that was neither purely nuclear nor gravitational, but something in between. The cores imploded, not outward but inward, folding space itself and releasing controlled gravitational shockwaves that collapsed everything within a 10-kilometer radius into pure silence. The Concorde Hall was gone. 12 member species lost their senior leadership in an instant. The moon's surface glowed as if a star had briefly kissed it. Yet there was no fire, no explosion, only a quiet hole, a void where peace once lived. Then came the voice. It played across every communication band, across every vessel, across every outpost, translated into every Concorde language, and yet it retained the unmistakable cadence of a human tongue. Calm, measured, absolute. We offered peace. You answered with betrayal. Now we answer. The message was not long. It did not explain or accuse. It did not seek forgiveness or offer threats. It was a declaration, not of war, but of awakening. Across the galaxy, Terran ships began to appear, quietly, purposefully, in systems once considered safe. They did not seek destruction. They delivered information, messages, evidence, proof of the betrayal that had once been hidden from public view. Civilian colonies were not targeted. Trade routes were left untouched. But every Concorde military outpost involved in the Silent Protocol was shut down, swiftly and without casualties. The Ghost Fleet operated with surgical precision. They struck at night. They left no trace. Concorde leaders, realizing the depth of their misjudgment, began calling emergency councils. But their responses were fractured. Their leadership was scattered. And the people of many member worlds, after seeing the truth, began asking dangerous questions. What if Earth was right? What if this was not retaliation but correction? And all the while, in the cold silence of the stars, Earth continued to listen. The voice of deliverance had spoken, not for domination, but to restore balance. Humanity had not vanished. It had waited, and now it had answered. Silence had become the loudest sound in the galaxy. Following the coordinated collapses on Cinder 6 and the emergence of the Deliverance Protocol, a single name began to echo in hushed conversations across starports, war rooms, and encrypted networks. The Ghost Fleet. No one knew where they came from. No official registry matched their designs. No visuals had captured them clearly. And yet, system after system began reporting the same chilling detail. Terran vessels appearing like shadows, executing high-level operations with zero detection, then vanishing without a trace. They did not engage in brute conflict. There were no dogfights, no planetary bombardments. Their approach was surgical, almost academic. These ships arrived, completed their objectives, and disappeared before alarms were even triggered. Some said they were not real, a psychological tactic, a fiction Earth had seeded to fracture the Concorde's morale. But they were very real. On the edge of the Doral Fringe, a strategic military corridor between three major Concorde species, a forward command station known as Zeta. 13 went completely dark for 6.2 minutes. When its systems returned online, its command archives had been copied. Every encrypted file, every classified operation, every movement log detailing the Silent Protocol had been extracted and broadcast anonymously across the Galactic network. The encryption was flawless. The files were untouched, except for a simple watermark added to each page. Truth does not require permission. Earth, even the Concorde's top digital forensics division, could not trace how it was done. Admirals and senior intelligence officials were stunned. They had always believed the Terrans had been pacified, their infrastructure dismantled, their leadership disbanded. But what was unfolding now defied every expectation. It was not just an act of revenge. It was orchestration. Back on Earth, hidden beneath layers of magnetic shielding and quantum dislocation, an ancient command center known only as the Locust came alive. It had slept for decades, its halls filled with dust and silence, waiting for this exact moment. Inside, the architects of the Ghost Fleet worked without name, without rank. They were not interested in recognition. Their mission was legacy, a restoration of humanity's agency in a galaxy that had once stripped it away. Each ship in the Ghost Fleet was built in secret across hidden asteroid foundries, their hulls crafted from carbon mirage alloys, capable of bending light and dispersing scans. Their engines ran on a fusion-dampened propulsion model, emitting no standard signature. Their navigation was guided not by artificial intelligence alone, but by hybrid symbiotics, part machine, part human instinct, enhanced through deep neural resonance. But perhaps the most terrifying feature of the Ghost Fleet was its network awareness. These ships did not merely operate on orders. They learned. They adapted. With each mission, their predictive systems evolved, identifying enemy patterns before they formed, countering strategies before they could be deployed. To the Concorde, this was not warfare. This was being outclassed in every dimension. One such ship, designated Vigilant 12, entered the orbit of the Concorde's data sanctum, a supposedly impenetrable archive moon where diplomatic secrets and policy decisions spanning centuries were stored. The moon was protected by a triple-layered shield grid and monitored by over 120 defensive satellites. And yet, at 4:13 Galactic Standard Time, every satellite turned away from the moon for precisely 47 seconds. In that moment, a single insertion pod descended through the atmosphere, reached the surface, and deployed a subquantum transmitter. Within 5 minutes, the entire archive had been indexed. Nothing was destroyed. Nothing was altered. The pod then disintegrated, atom by atom, leaving no trace but the silence of the truth it had just collected. The Concorde's governing council, shaken and scattered, began to panic. Some argued for an emergency summit. Others advocated for war. But the truth was undeniable. They were not at war with a nation. They were at war with a memory, with a people they had underestimated, with an intelligence they had tried to erase. Across neutral worlds, broadcasts from the Ghost Fleet played continuously. Not threats, not propaganda, but documentaries. Stories, personal logs from Earth's betrayed diplomats, footage of the silent protocol votes, testimonies from Terrans who had suffered in silence for decades. The galaxy watched, and for the first time in living memory, the Concorde's moral authority fractured. Some species demanded answers from their own representatives. Others began pulling out of Concorde treaties altogether. Civil unrest stirred not because of violence, but because the truth had found its way into the light. The Ghost Fleet had no emblem, no anthem, no politics, only purpose. And that purpose was spreading, one silent operation at a time. Earth had never needed to raise its voice, because in the void of space, even a whisper can echo forever. And the Ghost Fleet was whispering a single message: we are still here. The galaxy had been a carefully balanced tapestry of treaties, shared power, and strategic deception. At the center of this great political machinery stood the Concorde Alliance, a union of powerful species bound together not by trust, but by the mutual benefits of cooperation. For decades, the Concorde had painted itself as a beacon of unity and progress. Its leaders sat behind massive holographic councils, broadcasting messages of peace, order, and reason to billions across thousands of star systems. Citizens believed in the idea of the Concorde, if not always in its individual rulers. It had kept the peace, quelled uprisings, and maintained a flow of commerce and information. But now, that illusion was beginning to crack. Not because of direct war, not because of armies, but because of truth. The data leaked by the Ghost Fleet had become impossible to ignore. Systems that once dismissed Earth as a fallen relic began to question the Concorde's official story. Why had Earth been sanctioned so harshly? What had they truly done? Why had the Council hidden entire chapters of history from the galactic population? The first fissure appeared in the Nihilary Consortium, a trade-based civilization renowned for its neutrality and diplomatic clarity. Their ruling council demanded access to unredacted Concorde archives. When the Concorde refused, citing security concerns, the Nihilary withdrew from 5 major interstellar trade routes and began a full investigation of their own. What they found shocked them: private transmissions, bribery records, Statements from Concord officials indicating that Earth's leadership had been forced into betrayal by political manipulation. In short, Earth had not truly betrayed the Concord. It had been betrayed by it. The Nihilari published their findings publicly, placing their entire galactic reputation on the line. They declared the Silent Protocol a crime against sentient life. That same week, 3 other species, the Elinari, Vexton, and Thulmra, suspended their support of Concord-led operations. By the time these events reached public consciousness, the Concord Council Chamber on Archon Prime had turned into a storm of accusations and counter-accusations. The Rowland speaker slammed his 3-fingered fist against the negotiation table, demanding immediate retaliation against the Ghost Fleet. But not everyone agreed. The Himari Collective, once among Earth's harshest critics, now questioned their own past votes. Their younger generations, watching the Ghost Fleet's broadcasted documentaries, started organizing peaceful marches across their cities. They chanted a single phrase in the Terran tongue: "Truth survives." The Concord's strength had always come from unity. It did not know how to function in doubt. For the first time in a century, its high command split into factions, one demanding swift militarization, another calling for a council-wide truth commission, and a third, smaller group, suggesting amnesty and dialogue with the Terrans. It was unthinkable just months before, but the galaxy had changed. In the midst of this turmoil, a message appeared on every Concord-affiliated communication terminal. No source, no trace, just a pulse of light, then a plain white screen. On it, a single sentence in standard galactic language: "The truth you hide is not a weapon, it is a mirror." Then came the footage. Not combat, not destruction, but quiet recordings from Earth's diplomatic archives, moments of friendship, cooperation, and even sacrifice made by Terrans for their Concord allies. Images of humans offering aid to wounded soldiers of other species. Videos of Earth's last diplomats voting for peace, even after being denied fairness. Moments that showed humanity not as conquerors, but as participants who believed in the Concord's vision, only to be cast aside. It was devastating. Entire academic institutions began reevaluating their historical models. Young leaders across multiple species questioned whether their parents had upheld truth or rewritten it. The Concord fracture had begun. It was not just about Earth anymore. It was about the foundations of belief. The fractures appeared not in battle, but in silence, in the pauses during parliamentary sessions, in the quiet resignations of officials who had seen too much, in the glances between commanders who no longer knew who they were truly serving. Across the stars, smaller systems began to declare independence. Worlds previously considered insignificant found their voices and refused to recognize the Concord's authority until the truth was formally addressed. Even within the Concord's military ranks, the doubt seeped in. Some officers refused orders. Others quietly passed intelligence to neutral parties. A few even defected entirely, seeking out the Ghost Fleet, not to join a war, but to understand the truth they had been denied. And through it all, Earth remained silent, not because it had nothing to say, but because its silence had become more powerful than 1,000 speeches. The Concord had betrayed a people and called it justice. Now the galaxy was beginning to see that justice must be more than power. It must be truth. And once truth begins to shine, it cannot be dimmed. The galaxy expected war. After the revelations, the betrayals, and the unraveling of the Concord's carefully constructed lies, many believed that the next chapter would begin with fire, missiles streaking through space, fleets clashing, and systems falling into chaos. But Earth chose differently. Instead of launching fleets toward vengeance, the Terran Ghost Armada initiated something far more dangerous to the Concord, a campaign of truth and memory. Where others would have retaliated with weapons, they retaliated with understanding. They understood that no amount of fire could repair what had been broken, but the truth, if shown properly, could reshape the stars themselves. In the weeks that followed the fracture, Earth began transmitting historical records across the galaxy. No threads, No demands, only memories. Through secured frequency waves, they shared their stories, not just the tragic end, but the beginning. Earth showed its entry into the Concord with optimism, how its diplomats had extended their hands in trust. It showed how humans had offered medicine during the Sarkin Plague, even before being granted full alliance rights. It showed the Terravax missions that rescued children from collapsed colonies, children who were not even human. Then came the turning point. Evidence of falsified reports, manipulated intelligence, and intercepted messages from Concord Council members who orchestrated Earth's political isolation. Each transmission was verified, time-stamped, and archived. No opinion, just fact. And that was what shook the stars the most. These were not emotional appeals. These were truths that could no longer be buried. Civilizations that once saw Terrans as dangerous aggressors began to see them as victims of a system that had lost its moral compass. The Miriel, known for their spiritual traditions, held a planetary-wide day of mourning, not just for Earth, but for the ideals the galaxy had forsaken. The Triloran, a technologically advanced species, began funding educational programs focused on transparency and historical ethics, naming them after Earth's capital cities. Meanwhile, the Concord tried to regain control of the narrative. They deployed propaganda. They accused the Terrans of falsification, but it was too late. The truth did not need a sword. It had already lit a fire, not of destruction, but of awareness. Even Concord citizens began speaking up. In peaceful protests across core worlds, citizens held up signs bearing Earth's ancient motto, liberty through truth. Without firing a single shot, Earth had sparked the Great Awakening, a collective realization that history must be reclaimed, that justice cannot survive behind closed doors, and that silence is no substitute for accountability. The reckoning had come, not with fleets, not with fire, but with facts, and the galaxy listened. Because sometimes, the most powerful revolutions begin not with the roar of cannons, but with the quiet courage to tell the truth. The stars had always carried soundless stories, tales of war, conquest, peace, and promises forgotten. But now, in the quiet that followed Earth's revelation, those stories had changed. The galaxy was no longer simply watching. It was remembering. Justice, in its purest form, had begun to echo. It began in unexpected places. On Veltorin, a small mining moon once known only for its rugged terrain and harsh climate, the children of Concord officers held candlelight vigils in honor of fallen Terran medical workers. Their teachers, once bound to government-approved curricula, now taught lessons of unity, caution, and the dangers of collective silence. On Kareth Prime, one of the original founding planets of the Concord, an aging senator, long considered a silent observer of politics, stood in the Grand Hall and renounced his lifelong allegiance to the Council. He did not seek applause. He simply spoke, with a trembling voice, of regret, of the time he looked away when truth was within reach. His words were broadcast across 50 systems. "Justice delayed," he said, "is a wound that deepens." That wound was now being seen, and slowly it began to heal. The Terran Ghost Armada, still cloaked beyond the outer edges of known space, did not interfere. Their mission was never to claim revenge. Their presence had become symbolic, a quiet reminder that Earth had endured, and that silence would no longer be their response. Across neutral systems, planetary leaders called for reforms. The Zenthari, a proud people who once voted against Earth's seat in the Concord, held a referendum to remove Concord surveillance from their cultural archives. They had seen enough manipulation, and they would no longer participate. Even within the Concord itself, members of the military, intelligence agencies, and administrative branches began resigning in protest. Some left with public statements. Others disappeared quietly, their records sealed, but their decisions clear. A new generation had awakened, one raised on the belief that the galaxy was just, now discovering how fragile justice truly was. But this chapter was not just about exposing corruption. It was about redefining justice, And that journey took its most powerful turn when the Terran Memory Archive was completed. Launched into open interstellar space, the archive was a beacon, an unalterable digital vault of Earth's contributions to the galaxy. It contained everything from music and poetry to battle reports, cultural exchanges, and personal letters from Terran children to alien pen pals. There were no political statements, only humanity. The Concord could not erase it. They could not overwrite it. Every species, every citizen, every child in the galaxy could now access it freely. Earth, the once silenced planet, had spoken not through weapons, but through its memory. The echoes of justice continued to spread, not as forceful thunder, but as a heartbeat. Soft, steady, impossible to ignore. And in that rhythm, systems across the stars began to change, not through conquest, but through reflection. The past could not be undone, but from its ashes, something greater was forming. Not an empire, not a rebellion, but a shared understanding that truth is the foundation of peace, that justice begins when memory is honored, and that the echoes of one planet could awaken an entire galaxy. As the truth rippled across the stars, something unexpected began to take root. Not fear, not vengeance, but hope. The galaxy had stood at the edge of war, staring into the consequences of its silence. But instead of descending into chaos, something ancient stirred in the hearts of its people. A new alliance was being born, one forged not in treaties or political games, but in shared sorrow and mutual recognition. At the center of this quiet revolution stood Earth's survivors, not conquerors, not invaders, witnesses. They had shown what justice looked like when it was no longer chained by diplomacy. Their restraint became their strength. It was not Earth that demanded unity. It was the people of 100 worlds, farmers, teachers, miners, healers, who began to reach across the stars, searching for others who also longed for truth. On the moon of Telvanna, a neutral science station that once monitored black hole anomalies, the first unofficial Terran Alliance Council was held. Representatives from 33 different species, some who once feared Earth, some who had never even heard of it, arrived not with guards, but with open minds. There were no uniforms, no speeches of dominance, only conversations. The Terran delegation, led by a woman named Dr. Elora Jensen, carried with them not demands, but questions. What kind of galaxy do we want now? What does justice look like when we build it together? Her voice, calm and unwavering, echoed in the hearts of those who had once viewed Terrans as relics or rebels. By the end of the summit, 33 became 60. Soon after, 97 worlds signed the Shared Accord of Memory and Future, a living charter where no species was seen as superior and no voice ignored. The Accord did not seek to replace the Concord. It aimed to render it obsolete. The Concord, seeing its grip weaken, could not stop what had already begun. Several of its own member planets quietly withdrew, and their citizens embraced the Terran Alliance, not for what Earth had suffered, but for how it had chosen to rise. The new alliance established neutral memory vaults, shared education networks, and cultural exchanges that had not been seen since the first stellar expansion. Children on worlds separated by light years learned Terran songs beside their own. Elders shared their histories in virtual halls open to all, and warriors who once pointed weapons at one another now stood side by side as peacekeepers. The alliance had no single capital, no supreme leader, only shared guardianship. And so, the stars began to glow not just with distant fire, but with possibility. A future was forming, not by the hands of governments or warlords, but by the will of the people. And Earth, reborn in silence and memory, had become the quiet heart of a galaxy rediscovering its soul. After years of silence, Earth no longer needed to announce itself with fury or spectacle. Its presence was now felt through the ripple of decisions, through the whispers of shared pain, and the hope that grew in unlikely corners of the galaxy. But the time had come, not to march forward in dominance, but to step into the light. The Terran ships that once drifted as ghosts now formed a gentle convoy, No weapons were raised. Their hulls bore no marks of vengeance. Instead, each ship carried emissaries, historians, artists, and scientists, people, not symbols of war. As the Terran fleet approached the system, the galactic eyes turned to Earth's surface. What had it become? Was it still scorched and lifeless? But when the clouds parted, what they saw was not ruin, but rebirth. Forests had begun to reclaim the shattered lands. Rivers carved their paths again. In the ruins of once great cities, life had returned, not as a monument to the past, but as a promise of what could be healed. The first landing was broadcast across 100 worlds. Dr. Ellered Jensen, along with diplomats and citizens from dozens of species, walked together across the soil of Earth. There were no parades, no victory horns, only quiet footsteps on sacred ground. And then a small ceremony. A time capsule was opened, buried long ago by children before the attack. Inside were drawings, handwritten dreams, and notes filled with hope. One read, "If you are reading this, it means Earth is still here. Please take care of it. Love each other. Never forget we tried." Tears were shed, not just by Terrans, but by aliens who had once seen Earth only as a myth, a story to avoid. Now it was real, and so were its people. In a symbolic act, the Terran Alliance planted a galactic tree at the center of the old Earth Council building, using soil brought from dozens of planets. It stood as a living testament that no matter the distance, no matter the wounds, unity was possible. Earth had returned, not with wrath, but with wisdom. And across the stars, a message spread gently. Humanity did not die. It remembered, it healed, and it came back. As Earth stood once more among the stars, a question lingered across the galaxy like a silent wind. Would there be justice for the betrayal? The Terran Alliance had chosen peace. But peace did not mean forgetting. It meant confronting the truth without vengeance, and ensuring that history did not repeat itself. A special interstellar tribunal of memory and accountability was formed, hosted not on any one planet, but in a neutral orbital station called the Circle. Representatives from over 100 species were present, not to condemn, but to witness. The Concord, though now fractured and diminished, was summoned to face the truth of its past decisions. Leaders, governors, and military officers who had once turned their backs on Earth were called to speak. Not all came with arrogance. Some arrived with remorse in their eyes, others with silence heavy in their hearts. But this was not a trial of punishment. It was a trial of remembrance. Every survivor who had once suffered in the aftermath of Earth's betrayal was given a voice. From refugee children who had drifted in space for months, to Terran medics who had helped injured civilians during the nuclear storm, they all spoke. Their testimonies were recorded and preserved in every major galactic language. Holograms of their words would echo in learning halls for generations. One child, now grown, stood and said, "We do not want revenge. We want to know that our pain mattered, that someone heard us." And they were heard. The final verdict was not a sentence. It was a declaration. Let this be the last betrayal made in silence. Let no world ever fall alone again. From that day forward, a new protocol was enacted, called the Terran Clause. It guaranteed that any species under threat would have the right to an immediate hearing and assistance from the Alliance. No more political hesitation. No more waiting for the right moment. The tribunal ended not with applause, but with a moment of silence for those lost and for the trust that had been broken. Then slowly, people began to stand, not in protest, but in unity. The stars would remember. So would history. But now, at long last, Earth's voice was no longer a cry in the dark. It had become the voice of balance. The galaxy had changed, not through war or domination, but through truth, remembrance, and something far more powerful, forgiveness. Years passed. The pain of betrayal never disappeared completely, but it no longer ruled the hearts of those who had suffered. From distant moons to luminous capitals, stories of Earth's fall and rise were shared not as warnings, but as lessons of endurance, unity, and compassion. The Terran Alliance, now a respected pillar of peace, dedicated itself to one mission: to ensure no voice was ever silenced again. From former enemy worlds to isolated colonies, they brought medicine, education, and hope, not in exchange for allegiance, but as a gift from those who understood what it meant to be forgotten. A memorial satellite named Sol's Memory was launched into deep orbit above Earth. It bore no weapons, only glowing inscriptions in every known language. Here stood a world betrayed. Here rose a people who chose healing over hate. The stars remember. Children from across species visited it each year. Some wept, some asked questions, and some simply sat in silence, watching Earth from the transparent panels. Green once more, full of life and song. Ambassador Elora Jensen, now older, but not weary, stood at the edge of the Earth Council's observation deck. Behind her, a new generation prepared to lead. A council filled not just with humans, but with Drakari scientists, Velnari poets, and Exelon peacekeepers. "I never thought we would see this day," a young council member whispered. Elora smiled softly. It was never about seeing it. It was about building it. The galaxy had not become perfect. Disputes still occurred. Boundaries still shifted. But under the Terran clause, no cry went unheard. When a planet faced famine, help came. When pirates threatened the weak, patrols formed, not for conquest, but for protection. And when a small planet in the outer spiral suffered a quake that nearly wiped out its people, 100 species responded, not because they had to, but because they remembered what had happened when they once chose silence. The stars had remembered Earth, but Earth remembered them all. As the story of humanity spread beyond even known systems, one message endured across generations. We were the ones who rose from ash, not to conquer, but to care. We were betrayed, but we did not become betrayers. We remembered, so that others would not be forgotten. And as the twin suns of the Arcadia system rose over a new Terran outreach colony, a child looked to the stars and asked, "Will they always remember?" A teacher knelt beside her and said, "Yes, because this time we chose to remember ourselves." And thus, beneath the vast silence of the cosmos, the journey of humanity, once shattered, now whole, continued, not as a legend, but as a light.